Anohana is an anime that carries with it a plethora of themes and motifs that one can delve into its story in order to find. It deals with friendship, transitioning into adulthood, struggling with societal expectations, and trying to find or create an identity for yourself after a traumatic experience. All of these things are integral to the story, but I believe that our character's development, or lack thereof towards the beginning, really stems from one overarching plot theme: survivor's guilt. Except it's different from what comes to mind when we think of the concept in contemporary usage. The Merriam-Webster definition of survivor's guilt is a deep feeling of guilt often experienced by those who have survived some catastrophe that took the lives of many others. This derives in part from a feeling that they did not do enough to save the others who perished, and in part from feelings of being unworthy relative to those who died. Typically, as per the definition, we think of the phrase in terms of one person surviving a traumatic experience while many more people they were close to lost their lives in that single event. However, in this case, our main character's childhood friend Menma is the only one who died. That's one person out of 6. Maybe this sounds cruel setting it down to a statistic, but it very interestingly enough changes our perspective on what the term survivor's guilt could mean. When we look at it compared to the typical definition, a few things set it apart. As mentioned previously, this story entails 5 people surviving while one person is prematurely ripped away from the world. All but one of them never even saw it happen, and never had a chance to try to prevent it. At this point in the story, we see them as very young, perhaps only 11 or 12 years old. Menma runs off because of the immature and unintentional cruelty of our young characters, and ends up drowning in the river. From here, our surviving characters live their lives overcome by grief and unable to find solace or come to terms with her loss in any healthy way. This plays into a double layer that appears within our main cast. Each of them had a role to play in the actions and words that led up to Menma's death. Not only are they plagued with the guilt of being able to continue on with their lives, but on top of that, they all feel, to differing degrees, responsible for causing her death in the first place. The Super Peacebusters not only see themselves as unworthy survivors, but almost as murderers as well. Unable to cope, our characters carry the guilt of holding responsibility for her death, as well as the guilt of having the chance to continue to live and grow, which Menma's mother remarks on. Deep down, they know that they didn't kill Menma, but their guilt manifests itself as a rationale for the pain they feel. It's almost easier for them to say that they did kill her, as it assumes that they had some kind of control over the situation. It's easier for their minds to explain and comprehend than the idea that it was a freak accident and that the world just took her away so suddenly and without reason. This guilt in and of itself manifests within each character differently. As the show goes on, each person is forever changed by the weight of the past, and because of this they've taken differing roads in life. On a surface level, things appear to be okay for some of them. Yukiatsu is athletic and handsome, and he and Tsuruko are going to an elite high school. Anaru has gone to a lower level school but has become a popular girl and has a good number of friends. Popo has become a world traveler and seems to be happy with his laid-back lifestyle. Jintan, on the other hand, has become a hikikomori, refusing to go to school, and instead has completely shut himself in. He is the only person whose guilt is the most apparent in his choice of lifestyle, whose actions most people can see as a direct answer to his grief at both the loss of Menma and his mother soon afterwards. However, as the story progresses, we see the manifestation of their guilt revealed one by one. Jintan's guilt comes from a rejection of Menma due to an embarrassing situation that he was put in. Anaru had asked him if he liked Menma, and his immature childhood response was to say no and call her ugly as a defense mechanism. He then runs away to escape the awkwardness of the situation, which causes Menma to run after him. Jintan has forever yearned to apologize to her, but never got the chance due to her passing. Anaru had and still has feelings for Jintan, and had asked that question for selfish reasons. This is part of her guilt. Always looking to emulate Menma and jealous of her relationship with Jintan, she now lives her life by trying to blend in and be like the others around her, strongly influenced by and self-conscious of the opinions of others. Yukiatsu had run after Menma, confessing his love for her and offering her a hair clip. She turned him down, continuing after Jintan and soon after losing her life. Yukiatsu is haunted by her rejection. He struggles with his inferiority complex when it comes to the former leader of the Super Peacebusters, and believes that if Menma should haunt anyone, it should have been him, angered at the thought that even in death, she would return only to Jintan. On top of all of this, Yukiatsu is, all these years later, still stuck in Jintan's shadow, even after all he's accomplished. At night, he runs through the forest where she died in a sundress and white wig, trying desperately to cope with his guilt by pretending to be her, and, by extension, pretending she is still alive. Tsuruko feels regret at her joy stemming from Menma's rejection of Yukiatsu, as she has feelings for him. She lives her life close to him. They go to the same school and are often seen together. Many people even mistake the two for lovers. She has always been a quiet, calculating voice of reason for the group. She tends to psychoanalyze and point out the faults of the other characters, but her own biggest fault lies in her hypocrisy. Tsuruko found and kept the hair clip that Yukiatsu had offered to Menma. At night, when she's alone in her room, she'll wear the hair clip and wish that he could love her instead of a dead girl. For all her high and mighty words, she is just as broken and flawed as the others. Popo is perhaps one of the more complex yet underdeveloped characters in the show. He is the only one who actually witnessed Menma's drowning, having seen her being taken by the river's currents. The thought that he could have possibly saved her weighs heavily on his heart, and he's never been able to forgive himself for it. Menma's death and his guilt at having not been able to save her has left him restless and unable to settle down anywhere. As such, he's become a listless wanderer, taking up residence at the secret base only when he happens to be back in Japan. This is why he is so easily able to accept the idea that Menma has returned. He desperately needs closure. He needs a second chance to save her by sending her off to heaven. Here we see the event that drove them apart, as well as the themes that tie them together. Not one of them was able to move on, each carrying his or her unspoken griefs and guilt with them for years. Survivors of an accident that they had little control over, they lived their lives frustrated by the unspoken words and an inability to right their wrongs. Time is the river, and our characters are the shoes of a little girl stuck bumping slightly against the banks. The resolution, then, comes in the form of our characters coming to terms with the mistakes of their past. Beyond the reasons Menma gives throughout the show, the overarching reason for her return was to heal the wounds of her friends and close the divide between them. Whether she knew it or not, her wish wasn't to be reincarnated, sent to heaven, or even to see fireworks. Those were merely used as ways to bring the Super Peacebusters back together, to get them to grow and finally overcome their sorrow. She loved them and wouldn't have been able to rest until their guilt had come to a head and brought the truth out of all of them. As such, two Menmas exist. The physical ghost of Menma that we see interact with the world, and the ghost of Menma that lingered in all of our characters' minds. The ghost of their failure, regret, and guilt. Deep down she knew that they needed to put their past to rest before she could be as well. In the end, our characters have closure. The truth has finally been painfully brought to the forefront for each of them, and the weight has been lifted off their shoulders. Each one of them is able to come to terms with their past as Menma forgives them, and while nothing can erase her loss from their lives, they are finally able to follow the currents of their changing world without being completely left behind in solitude and grief. Anohana is about many things, but just as much as it is a story of survivors' guilt, it is also a story of forgiveness and reconciliation with others, and perhaps more importantly, with oneself. Yukiatsu, Tsuruko, Popo, Anaru, and Jintan all are forced to face the ghosts that they had for so long ignored or desperately tried to bury. Finally, the shackles are broken, the restraints are gone, and our characters can finally swim to the surface and breathe for the first time in years. They will not drown in their guilt. Instead, they will ride the currents to new destinations. They will grow, they will love, they will always remember Menma, as the flower that they saw that day. Thank you for watching. If you were moved by Anohana or simply enjoyed this character analysis, please leave a comment below. Thanks again.